Simple ETL. So we'll be focusing on Python and SQL Server and Google Sheet as well. So we'll be generating records in Python, move these records into our SQL Server, and from SQL Server back to Python. So I'll be using a library called Faker. I'll first create a file that I'll open and copy a path. After I've copied that path, paste it on our command prompt. You can just type CMD on your computer, and that command prompt will pop up, and then you paste that path by first typing CD and then type code space dot, then you press enter. And this is a simple way to actually, or a quicker way to open your VS Code, which is why I would recommend you to have all the extensions, everything set up, your whole VS Code configured, and your SQL Server. If you don't have those two in your machine, I will create another video whereby I'll show you how you can install those tools and how you can configure or set them up. So here, obviously, on your top left top left corner, I have new file and folder, which I created a file called data.py, since we'll be running our Python script. So now, as I mentioned, that I'll be using a library called Faker. I'll go ahead, import those libraries. I'll obviously start with pandas, numpy. If you like, you can just say import numpy as np, pandas and as dp and all that stuff, but well, I don't think it's necessary. So now that I have imported my Faker, I will go ahead, define my function. Why? Because functions are very good when you work with Python script. If you want to know about why and all that, we can have another video for that. But for this one, as we go along with the video, you'll understand why we are defining our function. And now I'm going to initiate my empty list, which will be useful as we go along. And I'll initiate my for loop, which is good for iterating your values. So maybe if I were to put it in simple terms, for it's just like a for loop, which is used for iterating over a sequence. You can think of a list, table, strings, but in this case would be more into object. As you can see, I have range. So maybe just probably asking yourself, why do we have underscore? That other underscore is just like a dummy variable, which signifies that the values assigned to this variable in each iteration is not going to be used within the loop, because it's just like a dummy variable. So that's why they are not going to be used within the loop. And I've specified on my range that I want 100 records. Okay, specifically 100 rows. Then now, with the data that I'm creating, I've just added fields that I want on my table. So the first one is ID, and I'm using that UUID, which generates unique IDs, and it's actually good than just using 1, 2, 3, 4 and all that. And I'll just create only 4 fields, because this is just an example on how you can generate your own records without having to download data and all that stuff. So I'm using numpy and obviously random integers that I've specified. I want the age to be between 13 and 21, and and then I'll add scores, which is just like another random integer. So the reason why I'm adding these fields with integers, I wanna do some transformation on SQL, and just like as part of an example of how you, when you've transformed your data in SQL Server and then move those records into Python to continue with your advanced analytics, create a dashboard in Google Sheets by connecting Google Sheets and Python and all that. It's a whole ETL. Such an amazing. So here I'm just appending data on our our initiated empty list. Why? Because once it's done iterating all the records, so it will then we then append on that list, so we can convert the whole situation into a data frame, so we can be able to say it like, I can call it a normal data. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So then I'll have to return that data product, because when we call that function, we need to see our normal data frame, which is why I'm just going to make an example just by printing, just to show you that now we have our data frame, but I don't want everything. I just want the head of that table. Now let's look at this table. We have 4 fields. So if you get errors, I would suggest that you do the try and accept, so you can see where's your error and all that. In this case, I've just skipped all that part and just went straight to generating records. So now I am going to define another function. You see now how it's so useful, because I have everything, like when I generate records, like having the loop, range, and all that stuff, like within our data function. Now on this function, the second one, that's for SQL Server. So I'll just define it because I wanna push these records into SQL Server. So I'll just define it. So when I call this function, it runs everything that's within that function. Maybe that it will make sense if I say in that way. But if you understand, oh, that's great. So I need to create a connection. Remember, we need to connect SQL Server with Python. And it's always good that you do the try and accept, so that if you bump into an error, you can see where there is error. You can say an exception, or you can just use the Python Open Database to get that error. So in this case, I'll just use Open Database, Python Open Database connection. So because that is like, I think it will be more specific. So I'll have to first import that Py Open Database, then so I can be able to use it. So in that exception, instead of using exception, just to see if I got an error, I'll just use the error from the Python Open Database connection, and I'll just say as E, which is error, and then I'll just write a print statement. So I'll just say anything like, okay, we have an error now, something like that. And this is more helpful, and I would recommend you do the same for generating your records, but you don't have to. But well, I recommend you to do that just in case you get an error and you know where there is an error. So here, I hope you can still hear my voice, because I have a flu, just to remind you in case you forgot. Probably asking yourself what's wrong with this guy. So I'll just print a successful operation there, in case like if this went successfully. So then Oh, I have to create a connection. So obviously, like as I said, you need to know all your credentials or your SQL, your instance database, your use and all that details. So now we'll have to open our SQL Server so we can actually just populate all that information. But in this case, like one, you need to know the drive that you have on your machine. Do you have open database connection driver 18 or 17? But I do have 18. I think I have both actually. So this is driver 18 for SQL Server, and I will write my server name. And this, in my case, I have a local server, and database. I think it's analytics, um, user ID, demo user, and password. And you need to specify. You need to write your trust server certificate. You need to say yes, because remember, even with SQL Server, you need to trust your server certificate for security reasons. So in this case, I'll just continue adding all the information. Now that we are done, let's open SQL Server just to confirm a few things. Because I'm thinking like maybe I wrote something wrong, like my details, my SQL Server instance details. Obviously, like we need a cursor. When you do execution on your SQL Server in Python, you need a cursor. So obviously, I'll just define that CUR, which is our cursor from our connection. And let me just open that SQL Server so I can actually just create a table. Remember, like when you push records from Python to SQL Server, so you need to have an empty table on SQL Server where these records will be inserted into, right? So in this case, I'm going to create a table, and then remember, like whatever information that you populate on the other side, it should be exactly the same that you have here on your SQL Server. Otherwise, you might have a problem. So since I've just connected on my SQL Server, I have two ways that I can create a table. You can just use a script, or you can just right click on your database on that table folder and then create a new table, specify your data type. Speaking of data type, I will have another video on how to deal with data type on the table, how you can make your script be more quicker if you have bigger data and all that stuff. But anyway, like I'll talk more about that later on another video. So if we can look at the top left, you see you have master, so it won't run. You need to change that into analytics. That's option 1. Option 2, you can just say use analytics, and then you can create your table. One of them, you should do one of them. Either you say use analytics, or you just change up there on the left, top left. So I'll obviously give this table a name. Could be any name, but then I'll just say generate something, generated records or something like that. And I will put my data types as well, as I mentioned. If you know how to create a table, that's great. If you don't, just add a comment on and just maybe just specify and maybe like say something like you wanna know how to create table, how to, I can just do another video on how you can create a table, delete, update, delete a column, all those stuff. Like, but if you're familiar with that, then I'm happy. So here I'm just adding data types. I've just added like 55, just like, so that it doesn't, we can add 20 because I don't think there's any string that's more than 20 characters. Now let's see, I'll comment that out, and let's see, just to show you that this table is empty. And now we can go back to our VS Code and we can just remember our table name. It's generated records, I think. And then we can say insert into, because we need to now tell Python that, hey buddy, we want to insert these records into SQL Server, obviously, and it should be in a SQL Server, in a SQL format, the script. So now I need to, just like how you do the insert on SQL Server. So I have ID, names, age, scores, and on values I'll just put question marks because it doesn't know what records. So that it's more like a placeholder to say, okay, anything, any value actually, it can go there, like could be a string, could be, so that's why we put that question mark. And then we'll go ahead and remember we created a function called data function. Now we need to bring that data. Remember, every time we execute that function, we bring the we execute that function, we then get as a we get a table in our return. Remember, like we added return blah blah blah, which is data product. So now we're just going to assign or just define that generated records as that function. If you run that generated records, then you'll get that table. So now once we are done, we need to create a for loop, which is a sort of a way of how you can sort of like get the records one by one into something. So in this case, like row in generated record, it means it takes like row 1, row 2, row 3. It will insert them into SQL Server. I wish like there was a simpler way to explain this, but then this is the only way. When we execute, when we execute, we need that for loop so that it can iterate. It can actually enter those records one by one up until we reach 100 rows, as we specified. Our range is 100. And then here obviously we start with our SQL query, and then we have that row specifying what field, because we're dealing with the row and the field, the row field, like which, sorry, yeah, field, row field, row 1 field 1, row 1 field 2, row 1 field 3, row 1 field 4. We go to another row, row 2 field 1, row 2 field 2, row 2 field 3, row 2 field 4. So it will continue up until it reaches 100. So here I'm just adding those name of the fields, which is ID, names, age, and scores. Once we are done with this, remember every time we need to commit on our connection. So these are the steps that you need to follow as you insert your records from Python to your SQL Server. So the next step will be obviously just to commit. It's like how you do it on relationships. You have to commit body. You definitely need to commit body. Then now it will be we're going to execute, and when we execute this push to SQL Server function, then it will definitely push those records into SQL Server, and it will follow all these steps that we've added. Oh my god, let's see if this will throw an error. But hopefully it doesn't, because I don't think there's anything that we've done wrong. So now if we execute this, we need to see operation was successful. Bang. So we have operation was successful. Good news. So now let's look into our SQL Server, and we can see that all the records have populated in our SQL Server. Oh my god, congratulations, you managed to move records from, actually not move, insert records in your SQL Server table. Now let's do some small transformation, just like, just any transformation that you might have to do with SQL Server. And we can just have another table. We can name it updated or whatsoever table, so we can just push those records again to Python if you want to do other advanced analytics, since Python has great features. And in that way, you can even push those records into your Google Sheets. You can actually connect Google Sheet with Python as well. But in this video, we won't be covering that. It's just only SQL and Python. So since now we have those extra fields, so we just have to get those records from SQL to Python. Remember, the whole reason of doing that, it was just like a simple transformation whereby I just added an age group and a score status type of thing. So now I'm going to create another, define another function. So we're extracting data from SQL Server. So this is another way from SQL Server to Python. So you probably now are aware why we prefer using defining functions. It's actually easier to do that. So obviously we need to create a connection. Always we have to create a connection, and remember your name of your table, because now we have the updated generated Baker records. So just go ahead just to avoid redoing everything from scratch all over again. So in this case, it would just be easier for me to just like use what I already have just to save time. And obviously I want to know where there's an error. I will add that try and accept. So in this case, I'll just accept exception. I don't have to say I open database, but you can still do that. This is just like to show you that you can still like see where there's an error if your connection is not successful. So this one, it's very simple because we're not populating, we're just extracting. So now we just select all the fields from updated generated Faker records. So yeah, so now what we need to do is we need to name like define updated data, and then we do use our pandas. Obviously we need to convert that into a data frame, so we're going to use a read SQL Server from pandas. Read SQL script. So we're going to add that our query and our connection so that it can execute that script. Then it will connect and execute that script. And obviously we need to return that, because when we execute that function, then we need to see those records, which is why we do use a return, just like how we did on the first function. And I'm just going to print out the head of the table just to show you that everything that we've done on SQL Server, it will just show here, just like there we go. So we have our age group and score status, just like how we did on SQL Server. And thank you for watching, and I will have another video whereby, as I promised, how we can connect Python and Google Sheet. So in that way we can move our records, we can populate our records into Google Sheets from here. Just think of it like a scenario whereby you have a client and they have data on Google Sheets. You have that link whereby they populate data, and then you have that updated Google Sheet, that live data. So you can pull those records from Google Sheets into Python, and then Python. Thank you for watching, and if you have any comment, just add on the comments